One castle after another formed a ring, and in the middle of the ring of castles, there was a huge cylindrical screen of light. One castle after another formed a ring, and in the middle of the ring of castles, there was a huge cylindrical screen of light. Brother Yi, tell Yi Sheng to follow him. There is a special entrance for them, Shen Jun said to Yi Futian. A saint stepped out to lead the way. Yi Futian nodded. Yu Sheng and the rest of the participants followed the guide and headed for the lower parts of the castles. Shen Jun brought Yi Futian and the ones who remained to the top of the ring of castles. Guards were verifying their identities. Shen Jun said to Yi Futian, "Those who were brought by the city lords are allowed to watch the show from the very top." Yi Futian nodded, and everyone headed for the top of the castle and walked until they reached the edge. He took a look at the buildings before him, which consisted of huge castles connected in a ring pattern, and there was a huge space at the center. A layer of a formless pillar of light shrouded the entire place. It was completely transparent and did not hinder the view in any way. However, cultivators were all able to easily feel the barrier's presence. Every floor of the castles had corridors at the edges, enabling spectators to see the inside of the screen of light. There was where the rising dragon platform was located. Yi Futian scanned the area and found that the corridors of the tall, majestic castles became swamped by crowds. Some of them were seen looking at the ones at the top of the castles, who were of the highest status. They did not even need to spend anything to watch the battles. The ones in the castles, however, were all required to pay for their tickets with sacred spirit stones before being able to make it into the internal space of the castles to watch the battles. There were quite a lot of people who looked up at Yi Futian's group. They, too, were all standing at the top of the castle, the ones from the city lords' offices of other cities in Crimson Dragon Realm. There are people from Qinya City who dare to go onto the Rising Dragon platform? A voice was heard not far away, and the one who spoke was a saint who was of the same age group as Shen Jun. He, like Shen Jun, was someone from the city lord office of another city. Shen Jun took a look at the other party and said, "The ones from Qinya City this time will be able to rise." "That's so." The other party smirked and said, "Isn't that something to look forward to indeed?" More and more people arrived, and the numbers began to get so staggering that the place was boisterous. A group of people appeared at the top of the castle across from where Yi Futian was. They walked to the stands at the edge of their castle. Those people felt extremely extraordinary. A man and a woman took the lead, with the man looking extraordinarily handsome and dashing, while the woman's appearance seemed to be near perfection. Her body was of golden proportions, and that gorgeous face of hers had a demonic grace to it, making her look incredibly alluring. They took their seats, and many who looked in their direction mumbled to themselves, "Are the siblings here to watch the battles? Are they here to see who will be their future opponents?" They wondered. The two of them then turned their eyes below the cylinder of the Rising Dragon platform. The bronze gates leading from the castles to the cylinder remained shut, and the ones who participated in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon had yet to appear. Everyone wondered if there would be any top-notch fighters appearing. "Your Highness, why does the princess need to come all the way here? Even if there are actually extraordinary ones among the fighters, how would they possibly be able to be of a match to the princess and you, Your Highness? I'm afraid there won't even be anyone capable of even getting to our level," someone at the side quipped. His eyes were incredibly sharp, and his body seemed to be basking in golden light. "Jialofeng, bear in mind that this is the Crimson Dragon realm, and not the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm. Mighty ones are abundant here, and there are mighty ones from other imperial realms here as well. We can't afford to let our guard down," the woman with incredible beauty said. Her eyes, however, remained cold and aloof. The very reason they participated in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was to break through their limits and see if they could make it to St. Plain. They treated the fight as an ordeal. It went without saying that since she was already there, she would give her all to be awarded by the Crimson Dragon Emperor. "Yo!" A familiar voice was heard from far away. "Master over there." That voice had Kong Xian lift up her head and turn in the direction where the voice came from. When she finally made clear of the silhouette of the one who had talked, her eyes froze. An icy aura emanated from her at that very next moment. However, Both parties were separated by that formless cylinder of light. While it did nothing to hinder vision, it nonetheless blocked the aura. That filthy animal, she thought. Kang Xian's eyes were filled with cold, murderous intent. She then spotted Yi Futian, who was at the Black Wind Condor's side, right away. Is he here at Crimson Dragon Realm? And his bearing? Wait, no. She thought. Boom. Extremely dazzling golden light burst from Jialo Feng's body as killing intent burst, drawing attention from many around them. What is with the beast from Peacock City? Yi Futian thought. Yi Futian. Jialo Feng roared. Its killing intent laid bare for all to see. The insult that it suffered during the Battle of Empty Realm all those years ago could have never be forgotten. It was an insult like none other. Jialo Feng had actually been enthralled by Yi Futian, and was made to turn against its own kind, causing the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm to be a laughingstock in that year's Battle of the Empty Realm. Kong! The Black Wind Condor was about to open its mouth when Yi Futian slapped the bird, telling it to shut up. They were connected with a telepathic link, and he knew what that thing was trying to say. The bird was trying to say the same classic line that it had been harping all those years ago in the Empty Realm. Kang Xian, come and serve my master. The bird had once said. Is the bird getting addicted to yelling that back in the Empty Realm? Look at where we are now. You stupid thing, Yi Futian thought. They were currently at the Crimson Dragon Realm. The fact that the Kong siblings were around meant that mighty ones surrounded them. If the bird were to harp that classic line, Kang Xian would have stopped at nothing until she killed the bird. Does this asterisk shoal think that we're still back in the battlefield in the Empty Realm? He had only allowed the bird to pull that back then to have the plans for the battle set up by inciting Kang Xian. There was currently no longer any need to get on the bad side of the princess of the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm. The Black Wind Condor shot a dejected look at Yi Futian, wondering why his master allowed it to do all that back then. Yet not at the moment. Kang Xian shuddered at the very first word that the Black Wind Condor blurted, which almost made her leap out of her seat. That animal's voice had traumatized her back in the Empty Realm. The bird needs to work on its manners, and I've already given it a lesson. I've apologized for what happened during the Battle of Empty Realm, and I hope that you no longer hold any grudges over what happened. Yi Futian nodded to Kang Xian as a gesture of apology, looking dashing as he did so. Kang Xian managed to calm herself down due to how he behaved. She glared at her with cold eyes and said nothing in return. She naturally noticed Xia Qingyuan as well. In the eyes of Kang Xian and her people, however, Yi Futian and the bird had proven to attract more attention than she did. Jialo Feng, who was at her side, still had thick killing intent oozing out of its eyes. Yi Futian smiled and nodded after seeing that Kang Xian did not bother to reply, before turning his eyes away. Shenjun, who was at his side, shot a surprised look at Yi Futian and asked, You are acquainted with Princess Kang Xian, brother Yi? Emperor Xia's realm is right beside the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm. We have fought in the Battle of Empty Realm. Despite both of us being participants of that battle, we were on opposing sides, which is why they hold a grudge, Yi Futian replied, and Shenjun nodded. He did at least know that Emperor Xia's realm was neighbors with the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm. It was no surprise why Yi Futian apologized right there and then. It seemed that he had gotten on Kang Xian's bad side back then. With both parties currently at Crimson Dragon Realm, he was naturally wary that Kang Xian sought revenge. Kang Xian was able to rise on the Rising Dragon platform in last month's Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. No one else had been able to shine more brilliantly than she did. I do hope Yu Sheng and the others would be able to do the same this time, Shenjun said. And there was a peculiar look in his eyes. If Yi Futian was on Kang Xian's bad side before, then we will probably have to say our condolences to Yu Sheng and the others, Shenjun thought. You have offended Kang Xian before? Situ Yen asked Yi Futian telepathically. Indeed, Yi Futian replied. Several demonic beasts participated in last month's battle. The Kong siblings burst with their 9-colored light of the peacock, and they were almost invincible. They were tremendously powerful, Situ Yen reminded him. I fought her myself, Yi Futian replied. Kang Xian was indeed extremely powerful back in the Battle of Empty Realm. She was the daughter of the Demon Peacock Emperor, after all. Kong Xian was probably at the pinnacle among the sages in the pinnacle stage. She was simply a step away from becoming a saint, so she was probably there to try to make a breakthrough into Saint Plane. However, if she were to end up fighting Yu Sheng, Situ Yen did not say anything more, hoping that luck would be with Yu Sheng and the others. She hoped that there were not any fighters who were too powerful in that battle of the sleeping dragon. They might have ended up dead in the battle otherwise. Shen Jun did not have any good intentions in baiting Yu Sheng and the rest to participate in the battle. He was doing all of that for himself. If there were anyone among Yu Sheng's party who managed to rise, they would have participated as members of Qianya City. As such, the award from Crimson Dragon Emperor would have fallen into Qianya City's hands. As for the price of losing, Shen Jun probably paid no heed to that. Deafening sounds were heard at that moment, and the countless crowds in the castles were in an uproar. Low rumble of dragons seemed to be heard, and dazzling matrices on the ground seemed to have lit up. Matrix diagrams were activated, and at the very next moment, a huge, imposing figure was seen on the diagram. That huge figure had a fiery crimson color all over it. It was a crimson dragon and a demon saint. The dragon rose to the top, and with a deafening roar, the heavens shook, and it shot up to the top, circling in the air. The rising dragon platform. A human voice was heard from the crimson dragon, howling at the ones below, and the bronze gates were opened. Blinding light burst, and from with the gates in different corners came cultivators who had participated in the battle of the sleeping dragon, emerging one after another. The tension in the group of castles hit a critical point within a mere instant. Deafening cheers were heard everywhere, seeming out to rupture people's eardrums. Yi Futian turned his eyes and saw Yu Sheng's group walking to the rising dragon platform. There was only a single battle within the battle of the sleeping dragon, one where all mighty ones were to fight a brutal battle at the same time. The castles around the rising dragon platform were in an uproar. The castles around the rising dragon platform were in an uproar. The countless people in the ring of castles all looked at the ones below. The castles served as places to watch the battle of the sleeping dragon, and the huge cylindrical area had been blocked off by a screen of light from the matrices, which served to isolate attacks, as well as preventing participants from running away from battle. The battlefield was completely sealed off. There was only one opening, which was at the very top, where the Crimson Dragon kept watch. The Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was a battle where all of its participants were caged within the vicinity of the Rising Dragon platform. Only a handful of the most extraordinary was able to make it out from the opening, where the Crimson Dragon kept watch. That was known as the Rise of the Dragon, where the caged or sleeping dragon emerged. If a participant lacked in powers displayed within the battlefield, one could only keep fighting at the platform. If one were to rise and escape, that demon saint-level Crimson Dragon would have then acted to slap anyone who dared to make that attempt. There had even been cases in the history of the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon, where only one was eventually left standing. The last survivor attempted to leave, and was still clapped down by the demon saint above. What that meant was no one had been deemed fit enough to rise. Other than that, the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was one where life and death were totally up to the participants. It was very common to see deaths on that battlefield. The participants were, after all, trapped in one place to battle. If there were anyone out to claim someone's life, there would have been no escape, and the target could have only ended up killing or be killed. As such, the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon had always been known for its extreme brutality. After years where it had been held, only top-notch warriors dared to participate in the battles. One would have easily ended up as cannon fodder, and stood no chance of making it out alive. It was a good thing that the mighty ones from Crimson Dragon Realm were powerful enough. Mighty ones from all realms gathered at Crimson Dragon Realm, and powerful people kept showing up to test themselves out. Top-notch geniuses from all realms wanted to test themselves in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. The Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was a symbol of Crimson Dragon City, as a testament to the popularity of martial arts in Crimson Dragon Realm. One who sought perfection in the arts they practiced would have cornered themselves, battling top-notch figures from all realms. Anyone capable of accomplishing the rise of the dragon would have been awarded. They were even given the right to be a part of the Crimson Dragon army that served directly under the Crimson Dragon Emperor, becoming a part of the strongest army in the Crimson Dragon realm. Under such a background, the top-notch forces from the cities surrounding the Crimson Dragon city hardly ever let their younger generations participate in the battle, unless said younger generation members were extreme geniuses who were tremendously confident in their powers. While Shenjun was the young city lord of Qinya City, it was equally difficult for him to get fighters to participate in the battle. Even less so when it came to finding ones capable of rising from the battle. That was why he deliberately got near Yi Futian's party when he first met them, and it was why he wanted to test them out later. He went so far as to dupe Yi Futian into letting Yu Sheng and the others participate in the battle. A figure descended from the opening above the rising dragon platform at the moment, shrouded in holy light, as he scanned the vast area surrounded by castles. He briefly announced the rules of the battle. Young City Lord, the battle of the sleeping dragon sure sounds very dangerous, Yi Futian said to Shenjun, who was by his side. That was not what Shenjun told him before. Don't you believe in their capabilities, brother Yi? Shenjun smiled and asked Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded after seeing the smile in Shenjun's eyes. He then turned his eyes back at the rising dragon platform, and did not say more. The two whom Shenjun had selected to fight with Yu Sheng, and the others did not participate in the battle of the sleeping dragon. So it was easy to tell how tricky Shenjun was. He had already been scheming against them right from the first time he met them. If they were of insufficient strength, they would have been in danger after their scuffle with Bai Zhe back then. Shenjun would have had other plans for them if that were to happen, such as taking them in as his subordinates. Yi Futian did not know that even at that very moment, Shenjun still had such thoughts playing out in his head. It did not matter if they were to die in the battle of the sleeping dragon. However, if any of them were able to rise, they would have gotten on someone's bad side one way or another. All of them still would not have been able to escape from his plans eventually. That saint who was basking in dazzling light on the back of that crimson dragon took out a list and opened it. He then declared the names of the participants one by one. That list had actually been announced to the public prior to the battle, and many knew who the participants were. However, everyone remained attentive and listening. Every name read went along with a beam of light shining on a participant below, drawing the attention of the spectators. The noisy environment had surprisingly turned completely silent. Everyone was listening and watching. Pang Xiao of Crimson Cloud City. A beam of light shone on one of the participants when the name was read. He was wearing golden, lavish clothing, which was emblazoned with fiery images. He looked steady and stood like a mountain. Pang Xiao of Crimson Cloud City finally participated in the battle. The spectators were on the lookout for notable top-notch figures from every city before every battle of the sleeping dragon was held, speculating who was going to participate in the battle. Crimson Cloud City was more than just a city in Crimson Dragon Realm. It was also one that was established and managed by a Runhuang from someone from an imperial realm in the Crimson Dragon region, near the Crimson Dragon Realm. It served as said realm's territory in Crimson Dragon Realm. Such situations were not all that rare, and there were many places like that in Crimson Dragon Realm. The surname Pang of Crimson Cloud City was the surname of a Renhuang. Pang Xiao was of Renhuang blood, and a direct descendant of a Renhuang. Despite Pang Xiao's extraordinary background, there was a possibility of someone like him showing up in every battle of the sleeping dragon. As such, his appearance was hardly surprising. That was how prosperous and powerful the primary realm of a region was. It also showed how intense the battle of the sleeping dragon was. In the battle of the sleeping dragon held last month, the Kong siblings from the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm had brought several powerful demonic beasts, and almost reigned supreme in that battle. Who would be the ones to do so this time? Pang Xiao was the most renowned participant of the month. The saint continued to announce the names, and when he called Yen Tong of Flaming Prison City, the crowd gasped yet again, looking at the stout figure who was dressed in red. Yen Tong was the son of the city lord of Flaming Prison City, and he was now participating in the battle. It was said that he possessed invincible combat capacity in his current plane. There was hardly anyone below the Saint Plane in Flaming Prison City capable of withstanding his attacks. Other than that, there was yet another extremely powerful figure participating in the month's battle of the Sleeping Dragon, Wuxia of the Black Flame clan. He was a descendant of the Black Flame Emperor, which made him yet another of royal blood. It was a testament to his terrifying power. Pang Xiao of Crimson Cloud City, Yen Tong of Flaming Prison City, and Wuxia of Black Flame clan were the three most highly anticipated participants on the list. Many claimed if the three of them were not to end up fighting each other in the Battle of Sleeping Dragon, all three of them would have been able to rise. Yu Sheng Yi Wuchen, Huang Zhouge Su Ke, and Qin Zhuang of Qinya City. The names were read, and a beam shot down on them. The ones who participated in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon, that time were the five of them. Gu Donglu felt that what he lacked was not something to be found in actual battles, so he did not participate. As for the others, their powers were lacking, and there was no need for them to participate. In truth, other than Yu Sheng, Yi Wuchen was the only one who was notably stronger among the remaining four. Huang Zhouge, Su Ke, and Qin Zhuang stood little chance of actually standing out in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. Qin Zhuang was considered extremely powerful in the 9 states, but they were in Crimson Dragon realm. Knowing the background and identities of the participants would have given anyone a good idea of how difficult and terrifying the battle was. There are 5 from Qinya City. Many from other cities looked puzzled, finding the occurrence to be odd. They looked at the 5 led by Yu Sheng, and had no idea which force of Qinya City they belonged to. They were wondering if those 5 had death wishes. Some knew Shenjun personally and looked at him, feeling puzzled. Did Shenjun dupe them into participating in the battle? Only Kang Xian took Yu Sheng and the other 4 seriously. There was no doubt that Yi Futian had been the brightest star in the Battle of Empty Realm back then. But Yu Sheng and the rest were still able to ambush Emperor Li's city and took the imperial flag, after all, which was a testament to their immense power. With Yi Futian daring to let Yu Sheng and the others participate in the battle, she was unlike many others, thinking that there was a high possibility of Yu Sheng's party being able to stand out and to rise from the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. The saint who had been reading the names closed the list when he was done and said, "You may place your bets on the dragons now." One figure after another stepped into the castles as soon as he finished. What he meant by placing bets on the dragons was to bet who would be able to achieve the rise of the dragon. The rules were simple. The list had been read, and one was allowed to place a bet on the participants one thought the most possible of making the rise. The odds were 1 to 1. The rules were easy, as the likes of Pang Xiao and Yen Tong had an extremely high possibility of success in making the rise. In truth, however, with so many mighty ones participating in the battles, unforeseen circumstances were also very common. Judging from the statistics in every battle, the biggest winner had always been the banker. The Battle of the Sleeping Dragon and the Rising Dragon platform were both properties of the Crimson Dragon Emperor. While he did not lack such resources, he nonetheless needed support from such properties to maintain the greatest army in Crimson Dragon realm. The Emperor couldn't spend all his money. As such, those properties were managed by those serving the Emperor. Furthermore, absolute fairness was practiced. The Emperor was of such status that he couldn't tell the dragon to get in the way of those who had earned the right to rise. No one would have dared rub dirt on the Emperor's face in public, after all. Place the bets on Yu Sheng of Qinya City. Kang Xian ordered the ones behind her, and handed the person a storage ring. It was apparent that she wanted to join in the fun. She turned her eyes to look at Yi Futian, who was sitting across her. While she hated Yi Futian for letting her lose in such an insulting manner in the Battle of the Empty Realm, she nonetheless had complete faith in his capabilities. Such was her respect for the one who had bested her. Place a bet on Yu Sheng, Shenjun, who was at Yi Futian's side, said as well. Judging from the results of the test at that inn in Qinya City, he was confident that Yu Sheng would be capable of rising. Yi Futian took a look at Shenjun and asked, "How large of a bet can you place?" "They take bets in any amount under imperial level," Shenjun answered. "However, Few would have placed crazy bets. Any accident would have resulted in dire consequences after all. There were all manner of tricks that could have been played in the battle of the sleeping dragon. Anything could have happened, and no one would have had absolute certainty of anything. Could I borrow some? Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan as he asked. Xia Qingyuan glared at him and handed him a storage ring. Yi Futian smiled and said with a low voice, "Damn pity I'm poor. I would have bankrupted them otherwise." There was no way he would have missed out on such an opportunity, so he bet everything he had on Yu Sheng. Shen Jun looked at Yi Futian with a puzzled expression. He had placed his bet on Yu Sheng, so he naturally knew that Yu Sheng was powerful. Shen Jun looked at Yi Futian with a puzzled expression. He had placed his bet on Yu Sheng, so he naturally knew that Yu Sheng was powerful. However, while it was entirely normal for Yi Futian to want to place his bet on Yu Sheng, he went so far as to borrow money from the woman at his side. But then again, Shen Jun simply chuckled and paid no further attention to any of it. If Yi Futian wanted to have fun, it was none of his business. Don't get too carried away. It's difficult to rise from the platform, after all. Situ Yen heard what Yi Futian said and reminded him of the stakes. Go and bet on Yu Sheng. Place however much you can, Yi Futian replied to Situ Yen. Situ Yen looked at him in a somewhat exasperated manner before saying telepathically, "All right, I'll chip in and bet on Yu Sheng. Again, don't get carried away." She then headed to the place to place bets in the castle after that. However, her expression remained cold after she returned, not saying another word to Yi Futian. No wonder he went to Tear Bliss Palace apart. This guy is nuts. He went and bet everything he got, she thought. She shuddered when the sacred spirit stones and treasures that he bet with came to mind. Those things were not something that a doctrine saint would have been able to fork over. In truth, not even unblemished saints would have been able to spend that much on a bet, as those were not things they could have afforded to lose. He sure is a daredevil. And an insane one, she thought. You have bet too little. Put more in. How about telling your clan to chip in as well? Yi Futian said, trying to persuade Situ Yen, who was at his side. Situ Yan's face remained cold, and she did not bother with him. She was thinking that she had been concerned about him for nothing, and that she had been wasting her time. This is a rare chance, you know, Yi Futian said again. Situ Yen glared at him hard, and then walked away, pretending as if she did not know him. Yi Futian shrugged and felt it to be a pity, thinking she had been missing out on a chance of a lifetime. As a top-notch clan in Qinya City, the Situ clan must have been wealthy. Yi Futian was thinking how splendid it would have been if they were just to bet everything they had, their lives included. It was a pity that Situ Yen stopped paying him any attention. Why won't she trust me on this? He thought. Everyone returned to their seats, and the eyes of the spectators changed when they looked at the rising dragon platform at that time. Those who placed their bets were unsurprisingly in a different mood. They all had their eyes fixed on the ones whom they placed their bets on, having expectations for their respective candidates. Pang Xiao, Yen Tong, and Zhuosu were naturally the three with the highest amount of bets placed on them. Many placed heavy bets on those three, especially those from their respective clans. As for Yu Sheng and the others, other than a handful of people, Yi Futian, Kong Xian, Shen Jun and a few others, no one would have bet on them. Other than Pang Xiao, Yen Tong, and Zhuosu, some others were extremely renowned from other cities on the rising dragon platform. A low rumble of the dragon was heard, and the saint who stood on the back of the crimson dragon left the platform. Formless powers emanated from above that cylindrical screen of light. Matrices were activated to isolate aftershocks from attacks. Crimson glow showered on the space below. Countless in the castles waited solemnly for the battle that was about to begin. All of them stared at the crimson dragon that was circling the opening above the platform. The dragon then said, "Let the battle of the sleeping dragon begin." One figure after another on the rising dragon platform below, looking very serious, as none of them dared to let their guard down. All those who participated in the battle of the sleeping dragon were sages at the pinnacle of their training, which practically meant that all of them had 1 foot in Saint Plain already. The meaning of that battle was to be trapped in a crisis, battling many others who were at the top. None who lacked courage would have dared enter the battlefield. While it was not to say that one would die if they proved to be of inferior powers, but in principle, at least, the battle was not one where life and death fights were prohibited. If a participant was heavily injured, the risk of getting killed would be very high, making the battle one where people put their life on the line. Powerful, terrifying aura burst, and the rising dragon platform was like it was being set on fire. Mighty ones continued to burst with their power. The pressure within the platform became earth-shattering within mere moments. Some participants began to make a move after finding their opponents, attacking right there and then. The show has started. The spectators were tense as they looked at the battlefield. Formidable fighters in a free-for-all battle burst in an instant, making the scene exhilarating. It was a scene like none other on the rising dragon platform. Pang Xiao of Crimson Cloud City burst with golden light all over him as his arts were unleashed. Golden beams shot out with a force that could have torn everything in their path apart. Yen Tong of Flaming Prison City was even more ferocious than he was. Yen Tong unleashed his life spirit right away, a terrifying fiery giant, which looked like it was a devil from hell. Yen Tong melded with his life spirit into a single being, and his entire body grew to enormous sizes, becoming a god of war forged in the fires of hell. Every inch of his enormous body was covered in flames, which moved about like liquid, resembling lava out to melt everything. That pressure alone was extremely forceful. That huge hand of Yen Tong swatted away at a participant before him, who sensed extremely frightening pressure and burst with towering might of the sword. Thousands of sword will float about him as they lashed out at their target. When that enormous hand came down, the flowing liquid felt as if it had frozen over within an instant. Those swords were frozen in place at the same time, and the liquid fire solidified right away. Everything in that space was locked in place in an instant, and the swords were slowly being melted away. That swordsman was able to react quickly and unleash his life spirit, melding with his sword into one, and it seemed as if his physical body was transformed into a sword. The overflowing sword will merged into a single entity, and a flash of lightning zipped past. The frozen fiery lava exploded and crumbled as the sword attack surprisingly tore through Yen Tong's moves. The extremely sharp sword charged forward without stopping, heading straight for the head of that huge, fiery god of war. Boom! Yen Tong's foot stomped on the ground, and a wall of fire was thrown up before him. The entire space was solidified into a sturdy firewall. A huge fiery punch was thrown with extremely massive force. It was apparent he was versed in more than just the power of fire. The sword continued forward, but it was still melted and broken eventually. That powerful swordsman ended up dead within the flames. His body was burned until there was nothing left. Yen Tong swept his eyes at the battlefield around him and continued stepping out with overbearing force. There were heaven-splitting cheers heard everywhere. Those within the castles who had placed their bets on Yen Tong felt their blood boiling. He really is a mighty one from the City Lord's office of Flaming Prison City. Indeed, they thought. Zhuosu, a descendant of the Black Flame Emperor, displayed extremely formidable combat capacity as well. Boundless black flames surrounded his body, and where his fingers pointed, boundless black flames shot in a frenzy. The black flames were extremely overpowering, and they were capable of easily killing anyone they touched. Soon, 3 extremely formidable participants were killed by Zhuosu. The battle had only been going on for mere moments, and yet everyone was able to feel how intense and brutal the battle of the sleeping dragon was. It was just too wild and crazy. The great figures standing at the top of the castles watched in silence. Unless there were those of their losing or dying in battle, none of them would have shown many emotions. Futian was watching the battle as well. The cultivators of Crimson Dragon Realm, who were versed in fire-based powers, were clearly of a higher ratio. The realm was said to have 9 suns after all, and the entire realm was filled with a thick aura of flames everywhere. As for the battle of the sleeping dragon, Shen Jun had the gall to tell him that it wasn't very dangerous, fooling them into participating in the battle. It was easy to tell that Shen Jun never had the slightest care for their lives to begin with. He was simply using them to achieve his objective. From that point alone, It was easy to tell that Shen Jun and Bai Zhe were fundamentally similar. It was just that Bai Zhe never bothered to conceal his cold-blooded nature. Shen Jun, on the other hand, had a knack for manipulating others through plain chatter, so long as the ones before him would have been of use to him. Yi Futian's eyes were on that battlefield, and his heart felt rather cold. Shen Jun had been scheming against them right from the first time they met, making it apparent that Shen Jun saw those from other imperial realms as little more than prey. But then again, the score was not one needed to be settled in a hurry. He had plenty of time to get to that. Yi Wuchen, Huang Jiuge, Su Ke, and Qin Zhuang all made their moves on the battlefield, picking their respective targets. Their goal of participating in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was mainly to test themselves out, without the slightest intention of killing their targets. They only wanted to know just how powerful those at the pinnacle of Crimson Dragon Realm were. Yusheng did not move. He stood at the center where the battles of the other four had taken place. He simply stood there alone and watched the other four fight. He was there to keep the situation under control for all four of them. His current level was such that mere fights between sages would have done him little good in allowing him to further his endeavors to break through the Saint Plane. What is Yusheng doing? Shen Jun said. They should be joining hands to take others down. Since all five of them were of the same gang, it was naturally best that they join hands, enabling them to have an easier time overwhelming the others. The possibility of Yusheng making it out eventually was very high, and Shen Jun would have been able to see his objectives achieved, creating a win-win situation. He knows what he is doing, Yi Futian replied. Shen Jun frowned. His intentions could have been vaguely told by the position he took. He was there to keep the situation controlled for the other four. That was simply insane. By doing so, his battle at later stages would be extremely stressful. The possibility of him losing would have been great. However, since the battle was already underway, none of the spectators would have been able to do anything to affect the situation. They were able to watch from the sides. The coldness on Shen Jun's face became apparent, and he seemed less friendly already. Yusheng began to slowly move at that moment. He had been keeping himself at the center of the four battles around, just so that he was able to support any of the four at any given moment. He was naturally keeping a close eye on the four battles as well. Yi Wuchen's side did not seem to be of much of a problem, and he was able to handle things. He, at that moment, had the edge over his opponent. However, those on the battlefield simply would not have let Yusheng just watch and do nothing. One mighty one went up to Yusheng at that moment. Yusheng sensed the hostility from the other party, and he glared at that person with an overbearing look, uttering two words. Get lost. That person narrowed his eyes. One hell of a cocky asterisk soul, eh? He thought. A dazzling image appeared before him as he launched himself at Yusheng within an instant, bursting with terrifying killing force. He intended to bury Yusheng's entire body within the image. Killing light rained down on Yusheng, and yet the man remained standing where he was quietly. The light that coursed about his body felt like he had been wearing an armor fused with both Buddhist and demonic powers, letting the killing force rain on him while he stood around doing nothing. Boom! That person accelerated all of a sudden and brought dazzling images on Yusheng right there and then. His eyes were filled with wonder, wondering if Yusheng had a death wish. However, he saw Yusheng move at the very next moment. Yusheng bent his legs and stepped out with a loud rumble. That space shook violently, and a punch was thrown at the very next moment. That person had not been able to react in time. His images were penetrated by the dark golden fist, which then landed on his chest. He was sent flying with just one single attack. The one attack from Yusheng drew the attention of a small number of people. That guy seems very powerful as well, they thought. Furthermore, he never bothered going out to fight on his own. The one attack from Yusheng drew the attention of a small number of people. That guy seems very powerful as well, they thought. Furthermore, he never bothered going out to fight on his own. Shen Jun was somewhat relieved. Those two he had deployed to test Yi Futian's party out were half-saints, and were very proficient with the art of the blade. Yusheng was so terrifying that he had ended one of them within mere moments. That was the reason why he bet on Yusheng. From his perspective, So long as Yu Sheng practiced caution and worked with those around him, there was a significant chance that he would end up breaking through. Thus, he was worthy of being bet on. Yu Sheng did not bother following up with his attacks after sending that one person who came at him flying. He also did not seek to fight any of the others, and simply remained behind, holding the fort down. The other four were doing fine with their respective battles at the moment. Yi Wuqian had even defeated his opponent, and continued to fight others. Su Ke had some problems with his side, but the situation was still in control for the time being. Injuries and deaths were common in that chaotic battlefield. Some battles inspired awe among the spectators. The battles were unusually brutal, and many were already covered in blood. Yu Sheng saw a group of people closing in on their battlefield at the moment. Several mighty ones were teaming up in that group, and few of them were extremely formidable. While many had participated in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon to seek trials in crisis, it was not to say that there were not others who participated for other purposes. Those who were able to rise would have been rewarded or allowed to join the Crimson Dragon army of the Crimson Dragon Emperor. Of course, there was also the thing about winning bets. As such, team-ups were commonly seen in every battle of the Sleeping Dragon. For instance, Yu Sheng and the other four could team up right from the start if they wished to do so. But then again, those people would not have gone too far, and the number within such teams was always kept small. It would have quickly drawn the ire of others on the battlefield, prompting those people to team up and get rid of them first. As such, those who went about teaming up would keep a low profile to avoid drawing attention, targeting, and getting rid of those who were of little renown. There was also yet another situation, which, while rare, came with a greater risk. That was a situation known as the Hunt for the Dragon. The hunt had destroyed many top-notch figures for the dragon on the battlefield of the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. No one knew if the hunt would have occurred on this battlefield. Someone from Tianjin City. Yu Sheng was not the only one who noticed. Many in the castles noticed the presence of that group. Team-ups were more apparent, and as such more noticeable. That's Bai Qianluo. Shen Jun turned gloomy. Bai Qianluo was a son of the city lord of Tianjin City, and a very renowned figure among the sages at his level. While he was not comparable to the likes of Pang Xiao, Yan Tong, and Zhuo Su, he was nonetheless a legend in his own right, and many had high expectations for him. More importantly, he was not the only one from Tianjin City who participated in the battle. There were others around who were there as his support. It was obvious that those of Tianjin City intended to have Bai Qianluo make the breakthrough. Furthermore, Bai Qianluo and his people were heading straight for Yu Sheng. The first target was the battle that Su Ke was fighting in. Shen Jun cursed at Yu Sheng deep down for being a cocky B*****. They didn't bother teaming up, and now Bai Qianluo of Tianjin City was teaming up with others to take them down. Su Ke, stand back. Yu Sheng began to run as soon as he said so. His steps made the platform shake. Su Ke did as told by Yu Sheng and retreated right away, getting ready to shake off his opponent and leave the battlefield. The one who fought Su Ke sensed the looming danger and did not stop Su Ke as he was about to retreat himself. Clang! Terrifying killing intent filled their surroundings in that very instant. Formless sound waves that were out to take everything down seeped into the minds of everyone present. Su Ke and the one he fought before felt their brains shaking as they were attacked by the will of the great path of sound. Yu Sheng's brain felt just as rattled. He felt as if he was being assaulted with formless cutting threads of spiritual powers coming at him, lashing out in a frenzy, and trying to wipe out his spiritual will. Boom! Not only did he not stop, but he accelerated instead as he headed for where Su Ke was. A group of people came at him, at that very moment. Formless power swept over the place in an instant, as drumbeats out to crumble the space around them were heard. The formless killing sounds lashed out at the same time. Cracking sounds were heard as the one who fought Su Ke before was being attacked by the formless sound attacks, shaken, shuddering, and blood spluttering from his orifices. Clang! The killing sounds swept out again, and the group of people zipped past the person who dropped before. That person was then shaken so violently that his body was quickly reduced to dust. He was killed right there and then. Those who teamed up did not typically bother showing mercy, as they were concerned about their opponents teaming up with others to retaliate. As such, people in such teams were usually quick to act, and they would kill their opponents right away, giving nobody a chance whatsoever. Suke quickly turned into a gray mirage, and yet, he was unable to move faster than sound. He grunted, and blood was seen at the corner of his mouth. The other team ran at him like a raging torrent of formless killing power, intending to wipe him out like they did the last person. At that moment, however, a stout figure appeared before Quebec. The raging attacks beat on his body in a frenzy, causing his black clothes to billow and crack. Tearing sounds were heard during the attack. However, that imposing figure wearing dark golden armor did not budge at all, taking all the hits from the terrifying vibrations head-on, preventing any of them from reaching Quebec. As such, Suke only had to withstand the sounds and not the force. The ones at the front saw Yu Sheng appear right before Suke, and they did not bother stopping. They continued moving forward, and waved their arms at the same time. Drumbeats were heard and swept the place with the killing sound before. Raging torrents in their surroundings pummeled at Yu Sheng without mercy, and with extremely overbearing force. Boom, boom, boom. Thundering rumble was heard from Yu Sheng's body as the attacks continued to hit him, one wave after another. Yet, Yu Sheng continued standing where he was without budging at all. Bai Qianluo frowned at the scene before him. The team-up would have allowed them to generate chord resonances, and their power would have multiplied several times over. He stands there and takes it all in? They thought. That killing music circled Yu Sheng's body at the same time, with high-pitched noises heard in the air, attempting to tear Yu Sheng's body apart. Be it spiritual will or physical attacks, Yu Sheng remained standing and taking everything. His eyes were locked onto Bai Qianluo as well. A terrifying whirlpool appeared above that raging body of his, resembling a black hole out to devour all of the powers from their attacks. Black aura swept throughout the place and shrouded the entire area. Bai Qianluo sensed a looming danger ahead. Boom! Yu Sheng took one step forward, taking on their attacks while charging at them. Raging aura swept from within his body, and rumbling drum beats were heard. He threw a punch, which caused the winds to howl. His dark golden fist was wrapped in that same raging drum beats as well. It was as if the power of the Great Path, that they had brought to bear on Yu Sheng earlier, was then being used to attack them. A hurricane was whipped up, and the group was being bombarded intensely. Punches were flashing in the air, and their bodies were all being penetrated by the flashes of the fist. Bloody holes were seen on all of them, their faces ashen, as they looked down at their bodies. They teamed up, yet their attacks proved inadequate to make him budge. Yu Sheng, on the other hand, was able to punch right through all of them with one punch. The raging attacks caused Bai Qianluo to falter and back away. Yu Sheng then took a huge step, causing their surroundings to shake. It was as if he was able to overwhelm the space around them with just a single step. It was none other than the footwork of Xian Yuan. He took several steps continuously, and Bai Qianluo felt stifling pressure looming all over him. He burst with his life spirit, and waved his arms about. A gale whipped about as the power of the Great Path roared like thunder. The drum beats shattered the space around them as they headed for Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng stopped and let out an earth-shattering roar, as if he was out to burst through the drum beats through sheer force. He threw another punch, and it seemed as if a god of war launched together with his body. The opposing power of the Great Path was blasted onto him, resulting in a loud rumble, and yet that still proved inadequate to make him stop his advances. A stout figure was seen zipping through the air. Boom! A loud rumble was heard as his fist shattered the space before him, landing hard on Bai Qianluo's body. Bai Qianluo's organs ruptured within a split second. His body dropped to the ground limply, and his eyes were filled with despair. The look in his eyes seemed to be asking, who the hell was that before him? The mighty ones from Tianjin City, who were at the top of a castle somewhere, all sported gloomy looks, seeing the scene before them. Bai Qianluo was extremely powerful, and they had even deliberately allowed a group to participate in the battle with him as supports. As such, they had high hopes for him in that battle of the Sleeping Dragon, getting ready to send Bai Qianluo into the Crimson Dragon army. However, None of them would have expected that the whole group was brought down by a single person, Yu Sheng. Is that fellow from Qinya City? They thought. They looked up and cast their gaze elsewhere. Looking at Shenjun was shaken deep down as well, and breathed a sigh of relief. Yu Sheng did not let him down. He was ferocious enough even to overwhelm someone as powerful as Bai Qianluo. He seemed to have sensed something and looked up, catching the looks from the mighty ones from Tianjin City. He did not mind any of that though. That was what naturally would have happened in the battle of the sleeping dragon. Yu Sheng was drawing the enmity of others. He was wondering how Yi Futian's party would be able to leave Qinya City after that. That battle drew the attention of many, and they began to take Yu Sheng seriously. That is some fighter, they thought. He was also one who stood a chance of rising from the platform. There were indeed many dark horses in the battle of the sleeping dragon. Situ Yan was shaken deep down, and she took a look at Yi Futian with a peculiar expression. It is no surprise that he is so confident. It seems like Yu Sheng is indeed more powerful than expected. Indeed, she thought. Am I missing out on something here? But then again, it was still too early to tell. The battle of the sleeping dragon had only just warmed up by then. She was still thinking that Yi Futian's action of betting everything he had on Yu Sheng was too risky. While he might have had a lot of confidence in Yu Sheng's powers, he should not have behaved so recklessly. The battle of the sleeping dragon continued to rage on the rising dragon platform. There were fewer and fewer fighters on the stage. Injured and dead ones were everywhere, and clashes of the titans continued to break out. The intensity of the fights was such that even they had even caught the attention of the saints. Those below Saint Plain were even more pumped up. Final showdowns would have taken place soon enough. Everyone in the castles looked at that battlefield, where fights were being fought both on the ground and in the air. Everyone in the castles looked at that battlefield, where fights were being fought both on the ground and in the air. Other than dead fighters, others who have lost the ability to fight due to severe injuries went to hide on the side, not daring to continue. As those fighters lost the ability to fight, the others would not have deliberately fight them, unless someone had a grudge or a score to settle. At present, there were only tens of mighty ones who were still capable of continuing to fight. The strongest few were still around, such as the highly anticipated Pang Xiao, Yan Tong and Zhuosu. Many placed massive bets on the three of them. Those who had bet on them all seemed rather anxious, seeing all three of them still around, getting increasingly close to the goal. When there were 10 on the battlefield left standing, they were then allowed to try to rise from the platform. So long as the Crimson Dragon above approved of them, it would let them pass. All three of them had very good chances of earning such approval. Other than the three of them, the most eye-catching ones were Yu Sheng, and the others around him, especially Yi Wuchen, Huang Jioge, Su Ke and Amp, Qin Zhuang. After he had single-handedly wrecked the whole team of mighty ones from Tianjin City, few went to fight them. Some tried to challenge Yu Sheng, and all of them ended up being practically run over without mercy. While Yu Sheng would have refrained from killing anyone, as he did not bear any grudge against them, having some bones broken and eliminated from the battle was inevitable. The other 4 from Qinya City, who came with Yu Sheng, were all still on the battlefield, and that earned the ire of many. While everyone acknowledged Yu Sheng's strength among the 5, Su Ke was weaker than the rest, while there was a considerable gap between Qin Zhuang, Huang Jioge, and those top-notch powers. Among the ones who had fallen in battle, some were stronger than the few of them, yet all 5 led by Yu Sheng remained standing. There was no other reason why they were still around other than that Yu Sheng was there to hold down the fort. If any one of the other 4 were in danger, he would have saved them. Anyone who proved powerful enough would have had to take all 5 of them down at once. One fighter after another took to the sky, and the fighters gradually stopped fighting one another. It was as if they had come to some consensus. Pang Xiao took a look at Yu Sheng's party, and then at Yan Tong, Zhuosu, and the others, saying, "How about we take them out first before continuing our fight?" Good idea. Yan Tong nodded at Pang Xiao. He did not object to the suggestion. Will do. Black flames gleamed and flickered in Zhuosu's eyes, emanating an extremely dangerous aura. Yu Sheng frowned. A terrifying aura was sensed everywhere around him. It was not just Pang Xiao and the other two. Even all others who were left standing seemed to have agreed on the idea of removing Yu Sheng's party first. Boom! Yin Tong stepped forward like a fiery god of war, every step causing the rising dragon platform to shake as he charged at Yu Sheng. Fiery heat waves swept all over the place, turning into a firestorm out to drown Yu Sheng. Pang Xiao and the others made a move as well, charging with Yin Tong and emanating terrifying aura. Zhuo Su turned into a bolt of lightning, heading straight for Yi Wuchen. If Pang Xiao and Yin Tong intended to move against Yu Sheng, who was the strongest of the five, he saw no reason not to let them be. It would have been best if both sides ended up injured and eliminated from the fight, while he went on to take out the others first. Boom! Yu Sheng stepped out in midair, causing the rising dragon platform to shudder. His raging form charged straight at Yin Tong's overbearing form of a fiery god of war without fear. Both sides came near each other, and Yin Tong threw his arm forward. The punch thrown by the fiery god of war seemed like a red-hot fiery hammer. It was harsh and overbearing, and lava-like fires were seen coursing about it. Yu Sheng's arm streaked through the air, and his body seemed to be expanding as well, which seemed to be his battle form manifesting. The dark golden Buddhist and demonic punch burst into a myriad of illusions, before coalescing into a single punch again. Rumbles were heard everywhere as terrifying fiery waves swept all over the place, but none of them retreated. Pang Xiao's attack seemed to be about to connect at that moment. A flaming halberd appeared in his hand, streaking through the air like a halberd of heavenly gods, as it was launched at its target. However, the target was not Yu Sheng, but Yin Tong. The eyes of many froze as their hearts raced. They all seemed to have stopped breathing. There was indeed no trust in the battle of the sleeping dragon, and alliances were forged for the sake of convenience only. Pang Xiao was not only out to fight, he was aiming to win as well. At the moment he lashed out, one figure after another zipped past, and attacked at the same time. Several fighters were attacking Pang Xiao at once. That caused the spectators' eyes to freeze again, after they snapped out of their dazed state. Surprises kept coming. Boom! Yin Tong and Yu Sheng distanced themselves. Yin Tong's entire body of lava fire solidified, and was out to devour everything. When Pang Xiao's fiery halberd was about to reach its target, deafening high-pitched noises were heard. It still managed to tear through the solidified lava, and sink bit by bit into the body of the fiery god of war. The charged hit was exceptionally powerful, giving no chance to Yin Tong at all. As the fiery halberd tore through its target, the raging body of the fiery god of war crumbled. However, a figure shot out from it, basking in flames. He lashed out both arms at Pang Xiao at the same time, sending fires of lava at his opponent. Pang Xiao's expression changed. He thrust away with his halberd, tearing through the lava fires. But at the same time, attacks from several top-notch mighty ones were there as well, blasting straight at him. Hunt for the dragon. That term flashed in the heads of countless people in the castles. That was the hunt for the dragon plan in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. The hunt for the dragon referred to a group of people teaming up in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon, but would not have exposed themselves in earlier stages. They would not have stood out until key battles at later stages. It was only then the target realized that those who had been fighting their respective battles had been of the same gang. However, it was difficult for the hunt for the dragon plan to be implemented, as few would have been able to make sure that they stayed until the late stages. There were more who chose to team up right from the start, but there were many who did so drawing the attention of others, and were quickly wiped out. Many laid out hunt for the dragon plans, and never got to execute them, as there was no way of doing so. However, no one would have expected that the one to do so to be Yin Tong, the young city lord of Flaming Prison City, who was of great renown and highly anticipated right from the start. He was hell-bent on getting through the battle of the Sleeping Dragon. Yin Tong needed to win the battle, as his clan had placed heavy bets on him. Furthermore, as a native resident of Crimson Dragon Realm, he needed an opportunity. While Pang Xiao was someone from the City Lord's office of Crimson Cloud City, and a descendant of a Ren Huang, but his main forces lied in other realms. As such, He was not as familiar with Crimson Dragon Realm as those from Flaming Prison City. Many spectators found that those who participated in Yen Tong's hunt for the Dragon Plan were top-notch figures from many other cities in the Crimson Dragon Realm, instead of originating from Flaming Prison City. It was, however, apparent that they were all fighting Yen Tong. One could have easily deduced just what kind of a hefty price did Flaming Prison City paid to participate in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. The eyes of many spectators turned in the direction of the mighty ones from Flaming Prison City. If those people had paid such a hefty price to get the hunt for the Dragon Plan's execution, then Flaming Prison City would have definitely placed heavy bets on that battle. Many who had bet on Pang Xiao looked extraordinarily gloomy. Rumbles were continuously heard from the battlefield at that moment, as Pang Xiao was being ganged up on. However, dazzling light from his golden armor on his body held strong. Yang Tong turned into a fiery god of war yet again, throwing his punches at Pang Xiao, whose defenses eventually gave altogether. He spat blood from his mouth and was pinned to the ground from the air. Terrifying, devastating powers raged in his body, and he became severely injured. However, Yen Tong did not kill him, for he was still a descendant of a Ren Huang, and Yen Tong saw it fit to show mercy. The atmosphere in the castles felt rather glum. Pang Xiao sneaked up on Yen Tong, and yet he was the one who ended up pummeled. Of the three most highly anticipated candidates, one was officially out of the game. Many who had bet on him suffered losses. However, that was how the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was. At that moment, there were also the ones who cheered and howled excitedly in the castles, the ones who had placed their bets on Yen Tong. The game was set by then. Zhuosu, who was fighting Yi Wuqian, retreated and distanced himself from his opponent, a tight frown on his face. Shen Jun, who was on the top of a castle, frowned and felt something was off. If Yen Tong went to such lengths to execute the hunt, then there is no way he will go home empty-handed. He would have begun sweeping everyone out from then on out then. Only by doing so would he be able to show his powers and then rise. Situ Yen mumbled in a low voice as if saying to Yi Futian deliberately. That was what Shen Jun was thinking as well. Things had just gotten tricky. Yen Tong turned his eyes and looked at Zhuosu, saying, "Does anyone in their midst belong to you?" Other than his men, and the five led by Yu Sheng, there was also a group that teamed up right away. Furthermore, he sensed that he had been locked onto by hostile auras alerting him. The mantis stalking the cicada was unaware of the oriole behind it. Clever. Zhuosu smirked and one figure after another zipped past, gathering at Zhuosu's side. Many spectators were shocked at that scene. Two top-notch figures were executing the hunt for the Dragon Plan, and both parties managed to stay to the very last stages. There was still a group of people on the battlefield who did not belong to any side, and they all looked glum at that moment. How about we take them out before we have our final showdown? Yen Tong said. Sure. Zhuosu nodded. Mighty ones from both sides acted at the same time, but they did not team up. All fighters who were of one side or another went out to fight those without a side of their own, defeating and overwhelming all of them. That went on until those from both parties, as well as the five led by Yu Sheng, were left standing. It seemed that the final showdown would have broken out between Yen Tong and Zhuosu, or maybe both of them would have gained recognition as well. Shen Jun was despaired, seeing how things on the battlefield turned out. That was indeed the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. He schemed against Yi Futian, yet the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon was nonetheless filled with unpredictable elements. Yi Futian, too, lowered his head and looked below, finding people from both sides charging at the five led by Yu Sheng. The five no longer split at that moment, standing in a wedge-shaped formation, with Yu Sheng at the forefront, Yi Wuqian and Huang Jioga at the flanks, and finally, Qin Zhuang and Su Kei taking the rear, looking at the mighty ones from both sides coming. The ones on the castles took one look at those people around Yen Tong, who was, at the moment, walking towards Yu Sheng. There were several of them, who were top-notch figures from the city lord's offices. What more could one do with a situation like this? It seemed like the five from Qinya City were about to go down hard. They were only wondering if Yen Tong and Zhuosu would have been kind enough to spare the five of them after defeating them. However, many looked forward to such an ending to the battle. After the 5 from Qinya City got eliminated, Yin Tong of Flaming Prison City and Zhuo Su of the Black Flame Clan would have fought for the right to rise, and there would have been a great battle. However, many looked forward to such an ending to the battle. After the 5 from Qinya City got eliminated, Yin Tong of Flaming Prison City and Zhuo Su of the Black Flame Clan would have fought for the right to rise, and there would have been a great battle. The winner would have been able to rise from the Rising Dragon platform. About 1/3 of the spectators lost their money after Pang Xiao was eliminated, but there were still over half of them who had bet on Yin Tong and Zhuo Su. A great many would have been able to get rich regardless of whichever side ended up winning. As such, both sides looked forward to the upcoming battle very much. At present, they needed first to eliminate the 5 from Qinya City. "Do it," Yin Tong said and stepped out right away. His huge flaming body was filled with overbearing might. Terrifying flames shot from his eyes. The place where Yu Sheng and the other 4 were in became shrouded by intense will of the great path of flames. It felt as if that place had just turned into a purgatory. At the same time, those by Yin Tong's side charged at Yu Sheng's group from the flanks at blitzing speed, bursting with terrifying pressure. The incoming assailants saw that Yu Sheng was not bothering to evade, and stepped out right away, charging at the ones coming at them. Yin Tong grabbed at the space before him, and the purgatorial fires in that space turned into that spouting from lava, which were then gradually solidified, trapping Yu Sheng. Conventional pinnacle sages would have easily been burnt to a crisp with such a move. Close. Someone above extended their hand, and golden diagrams appeared one after another, closing in on Yu Sheng, trying to trap him inside the purgatory. Yet another person, who was versed in the will of the great path of space, froze the space Yu Sheng was in. In that instant, the step that Yu Sheng had taken seemed to have stopped altogether, with him being completely trapped. The others around lashed out at the same time. One of them held a golden spear and thrust into the air, aiming straight for Yu Sheng's body. Another threw a punch of the great path, tearing through space as it headed straight for Yu Sheng. The crowd heard nothing but continuous rumbles, as if that space was frozen altogether. Everyone threw whatever they had at Yu Sheng, intending to crush him with their attacks. Zhuo Su chose to continue to attack Yi Wuqian. Boundless eerie black flames gushed around him, emanating terrifying burning might. It was as if auras of death had blocked out the sky and shrouded the area, as he headed straight for Yi Wuqian. Yi Wuqian stepped out, and dazzling light was seen emanating from his brow. Boundless sword will surrounded him, and thousands of sword aura manifested above, with every sliver containing the power of the path of shredding. His will of great path was infused within every single sword will, and rules flowed as if they had grown eyes of their own, and attacked the black flames blocking out the sky, tearing them apart gradually. However, the black flames were extraordinarily overbearing, and were capable of burning off the sword will, which ended in continuous mutual destruction. Several moved in from the flanks. Qin Zhuang invoked his sword with a small sword diagram appearing behind him. The sword will from Su Ke flowed into him in a frenzy. He lent his sword to Qin Zhuang, as he had not been training in the way of the sword as long as Qin Zhuang did. Qin Zhuang had been able to touch the great path as well, and he was well on his way to becoming a saint. Qin Zhuang waved his hand when an assailant attacked. The small sword diagram zipped out and streaked through space. At the same time, Huang Jiuge's Runhuang Bao life spirit appeared, bursting with extremely brilliant light. It contained some powers of the imperial path. While he was still lacking in his development, and had yet to be able to develop will of the great path, the burst of might through his lineage of Runhuang was not that much weaker, compared to Qin Zhuang, who had developed such powers of great path. 9 arrows were shot one after another, tearing through space like rainbows, holding off the assailants. The few of them were more on the defensive. At that moment, terrifying destructive aura burst, and Zhuo Su was seen standing with a black shadow behind his back, which was tall and mighty, as well as shrouded in black flames. Zhuo Su was a descendant of the Black Flame Emperor. If he were to reach Runhuang Plain level, he would have been able to pass on the powers of the Great Path to his descendants, infused within their life spirits. As such, Those who were born from genius parents had it easier in developing comprehension of the great path. Futian, for instance, had it far easier in his processes of developing such comprehensions. Furthermore, he was able to develop a myriad of wills of the great path and interconnecting them. Zhuosu extended his hand forward and grabbed at Yi Wuchen. His pitch-black hand blocked out the sky like some devastating black hole, which was forged from boundless black flame auras. When Yi Wuchen's sword wills touched the black hand, they were burnt down right there and then. Yi Wuchen wore a solemn expression as a sword shot from his brow, ringing as it emerged containing the will of the great path. Sword wills in their surroundings flowed in a frenzy right there and then. Thousands of sharp swords condensed, with tens of thousands compressed into thousands, then hundreds. And the number continued to shrink. Yi Wuchen's body was shrouded with the light of the sword. The path of the swords merged into a single entity and fused with the sword before him. However, that devastating sword will was still found everywhere. Go, Yi Wuchen uttered. The sword shot forth and came to his enemy within an instant. The sword and the black hand clashed, which ended up with the black hole-like hand exploding and crumbling right away. However, the terrifying might infused within the sword was weakened as well, returning before Yi Wuchen. The act of the sword master of Lihan, lending his sword to Yi Wuchen, told the younger swordsman that the way of the sword was more than just expansion. It was one of contraction as well. One sword could have multiplied into 2, then 3, then up to 10,000. That was the way of the sword. Having 10,000 swords compressed into one was too a way of the sword. In yet another battlefield, many mighty ones were bombarding Yu Sheng at the same time, intending to destroy his body, which was trapped inside their attacks. However, none of them were able to see that the dark golden shimmer, glowing on that body, was turning increasingly bright. That terrifying lava fire of hell remained incapable of melting down his body. The intense offensive powers from all those around him were, too, unable to break his body. A physical body of such strength? Countless spectators on the castles who watched the battle shuddered. The attacks from Yin Tong and the others were absolutely near that of Saint levels after all. They were all baffled to find that they were unable to destroy his body. Just what kind of a physical body is this? They wondered. Yi Futian's expression was a calm one. When the medicine saint went to the Holy Ji Palace at the lower worlds back then, many had taken medicine baths, and Yu Sheng went through with the whole course. Furthermore, Yu Sheng was a warrior whose innate forte was his very own body, which was even stronger than Yi Futian's. Yu Sheng, whose body had been innately infused with the power of the great path, had grown to be infinitely near that of a saint at the moment. Boom! The solidified lava fires, dazzling golden diagrams, and other powers keeping him trapped all crumbled. Yu Sheng burst with dark golden light, and slivers of terrifying light of the demons swept through the entire place. Terrifying demonic storms blown on the ones surrounded him, enabling them to have a taste of unparalleled might. Yu Sheng's body hovered in the air. Dark demonic might coursed in a frenzy around him, shrouding the entire area, and spreading out to the rising dragon platform. Many looked at their sides and found dark demonic might brushing through them, making them feel chills all over their bodies. Yu Sheng's pitch-black eyes shimmered with demonic light. They were extremely overbearing. It was as if anyone who so much as looking at them would have been cast into boundless darkness, compelled to bow before him. The terrifying demonic aura gushed at his body in a frenzy, making that body of his look increasingly huge. It was as if he was constructing his battle form right there and then. A devil battle form appeared before long, standing tall in the air. Kill! One of the assailants waved their hand, and a golden spear was launched at him, banging hard on the body of the demonic battle form, and crumbling right away. Yu Sheng extended his hand, coalescing flowing dark aura at the center of his palm, and a pitch-black devil axe materialized. Boom! He stepped into the air and shook the entire place. Everyone was able to sense that overbearing might of the great path emanating from him, coming down with his steps. Yu Sheng stepped forward and appeared right before one of them, swinging his axe down as if to cleave the heavens apart. That person was terrified, throwing their hands with great force, bringing boundless golden diagrams to place the space before them in lockdown. However, at the very moment when the axe came down, cracking noises were heard as the golden diagrams were cleaved apart right there and then. The one who had made a move against Yu Sheng before everyone else was cut down right away. Their blood splattered all over the place. The roaring, noisy castles quieted down once again, as if that axe had cleaved onto their hearts. What kind of power is this? They asked themselves. Powerful will of the great path of space came down on Yu Sheng at that moment. He turned around and looked at someone. He then seemed to have crushed that will of the great path with only a single step. There was a magnitude difference to powers of the great path, after all. Boom! He took yet another step, and his opponent's body seemed to have been locked right away, practically pinned down. Yu Sheng lifted his arm and brought the axe down again. His opponent roared and shook off that overbearing power and retreated. A flash of the axe was seen brought down. Cracking, high-pitched noises were heard. A gash was seen on that person's body as blood was spilled. They then yelled, "I give up." Technically speaking, there was no giving up in the battle of the sleeping dragon. If Yu Sheng wished to continue, he would have been able to cut his opponent down easily. However, Yu Sheng shot his opponent a dull look before turning to the others. All of those sages at the pinnacle of their training from the significant cities felt a faint hint of fear, while Yu Sheng did little than shoot a look at them. Those pitch-black eyes of his were tremendously deep. It was as if they were able to see a devil like none other, looking down at everything in the world. They were all top-notch figures, and were very confident with their own powers. They would not have participated in the battle of the sleeping dragon otherwise. However, for some reason, they seemed to have lost all of their confidence right there and then. It was as if there were indeed people that they would have stood no chance against right from the start. That person right before their eyes was one such being. Boom! Yu Sheng stepped out again, shaking their minds. "I give up. I yield." One fighter after another was seen leaving the battlefield. They gave up on their battles and retreated. None of them wanted to face that axe of his. While the battle of the sleeping dragon was perilous, to begin with, and the chance of losing one's life was very high, but no one truly wanted to die. They were all there to fight for an opportunity. However, right at that moment, it became clear that they stood no chance against that monster, and struggling would have been pointless. As for what they have promised the flaming prison city, none of that would have worth throwing their lives away for. Let Yin Tong fight this monster alone, they thought. The spectators within the castles were thoroughly shaken. One man with a two-sided axe was able to force that many top-notch figures just to give up and run? Are Yin Tong and Zhusu going to win this? Will one of them be able to rise from the platform? They wondered. There had always been people who went on to break expectations of others in the battle of the sleeping dragon. There had been a lot of precedences. It was yet another day for something like that to happen again. And it happened in such a frightening manner. Yin Tong was the only one left in that area of the battlefield. Yin Tong was the only one left in that area of the battlefield. Yin Tong's fiery god of war form stared at the devil battle form that was equally as huge. Yin Tong's form, which was basking in fiery light, seemed to be in stark contrast with the demonic colors of Yu Sheng's form. It was as if they were destined to become archenemies. Boundless lava fire coursed and coalesced around him, which later solidified. A huge fiery hammer of the fiery god of war gradually coalesced before Yin Tong. It was crimson all over, and was a startlingly high temperature. He then swung his arm and stepped out, heading straight for Yu Sheng. Boom! Yu Sheng stepped and walked towards Yin Tong as well. Both men were cultivators wielding extremely overwhelming powers, and it seemed as if they planned to clash head-on. Boom, boom, boom. Both of them stepped onto the air continuously, causing their surroundings to shake. Yu Sheng moved according to the moves shown in the footwork of Xian Yuan, incorporating suppressing will of the great path into his steps, bringing extremely high pressure to bear. Heat waves swept across the air and hit Yu Sheng's body. The fires of lava seemed to be out to burn the heavens away, but Yu Sheng, who was literally covered in fire, continued to press forward, breaking everything in his path. He swung the devilish axe down, and there seemed to be dark demonic glimmer appearing in their surroundings, containing unparalleled power. Yen Tong shouted and swung the fiery hammer in his hand out, clashing with the axe. The sense of power emanating from it caused all to keep their eyes fixed at the battlefield without blinking. Boom! Heaven-splitting clashes were heard, and everyone saw Yen Tong's body being brought down, dropping to the ground at high speeds. That devil-like body continued to head straight for the ground, and yet another strike from the axe was lashed out. It was as if it was to bring down the gods. Yen Tong's blood was boiling, and his arms shaking, yet he continued to swing his hammer with all his might, clashing against the axe coming down at him. With another intense rumble, the fiery hammer was surprisingly split open. The axe continued to come down. It landed onto the fiery god of war's body. Yen Tong's battle form crumbled with a loud boom, and his body accelerated as it dropped. He spat blood, and crashed hard onto the ground below. Boom! Another rumble was heard. Yen Tong was unable to react in time, before the heavenly godlike body of his opponent stepped onto him. He even closed his eyes when he saw the axe coming down, waiting, in despair, for the moment of death. However, he opened his eyes moments later, and saw Yu Sheng shoot a cold glance at him. Yu Sheng then lifted the axe and charged elsewhere, not cutting him down. It was perhaps due to Yu Sheng not wanting to cause too much trouble on the battlefield. They were at Crimson Dragon Realm after all. Yen Tong, who had been able to survive, did not feel fortunate. He was simply rendered dazed. He was confident that his powers were already at the top of his plane. His powers were strong, and he was halfway into the Saint Plane. Even attacks from his life spirit had been extremely overbearing. Yet on that day, he met someone else who was even more overpowering than he was, who went on to pummel him to the ground using the most direct and raging means. He had been well prepared for the battle of the sleeping dragon, yet he lost all the same. Furthermore, he knew how much his clan had done to foster him, and how massive their bets were on him. There was no way he could have lost. Yet at that moment, everything was over for him. It was not just him. All those who had bet on him turned pale at that moment. The three most highly anticipated figures consisted of over 90% of the bets placed. At that moment, however, there was only one of the three left on the Rising Dragon platform, Zhuosu. How long would he be able to last before Yu Sheng? Yu Sheng's extremely raging silhouette, like that of Devil, left a lasting impression on those who saw him. It was as if there was no way to take him down at all. Yu Sheng did not stop after taking down Yen Tong. He headed to another area of the battlefield right away. Yi Wuxian continued to fight Zhuosu. While he was by no means at an advantage, he was nonetheless able to hold his own. As such, Yu Sheng did not help him out. He headed somewhere else instead. Huang Jiuge, Qin Zhuang, and Su Ke were at a disadvantage and stayed on the defensive, as they were being surrounded and attacked by several others. However, when Yu Sheng finally came, the hearts of those few sank, and they looked glum. All of them saw what happened in the battle in the other corner. There was no way they would have been able to fight someone who had been able to overpower someone as mighty as Yen Tong. There had been another top-notch figure from the city, who had been cleaved right away. Huge number of other fighters lost without even putting up a fight. I yield, one of them said, and was getting ready to leave the battlefield. The others made their stance clear right away as well. Yu Sheng took a look at Qin Zhuang, Huang Jiuge, and Su Quebec. His pitch-black eyes were icy. He switched the axe up, having the blunt side facing all of them before stepping out. Those who had yielded were frightened, wondering what was Yu Sheng up to, and they quickly found what he was up to. Sounds of bones cracking continued to be heard. Their internal organs seemed as if they had been ruptured, and all of them soon dropped to the ground, looking like having one foot in their coffins. Yu Sheng did not kill them, but their current state meant that it would have taken them months before they were able to get up again. We're done for. Those who had bet on Zhuosu looked despaired, finding themselves completely done for. Almost everyone lost in that battle of the sleeping dragon. A dark horse emerged out of nowhere and stole everyone else's thunder. However, no one would have been insane enough to bet on someone who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Situ Yen had placed her bets, but she hardly felt happy at all. She looked at Yu Sheng, and then at Yi Futian. She then recalled what Yi Futian said to her before. He told her to bet everything she had on Yu Sheng, and she took him for a lunatic back then. But looking back, she wondered who had been the lunatic, and who had been the idiot. While she had placed her bet and she won, she nonetheless felt that she had missed out on a once-in-a-lifetime chance. But then again, who dared to do that back then? Two others placed their bets on Yu Sheng, Shen Jun and Kong Xian. Shen Jun seemed to have achieved his objective. Despite not having placed that huge of a bet, he earned considerably from it, which made it worthwhile for him to have laid such schemes in place. However, he was still concerned. Yu Sheng was too powerful. Furthermore, it was not just Yu Sheng. He felt something out of the ordinary with Yi Wuchen, and even Huang Jiuge as well. Those people did not seem to be people studying under the same teacher. Kong Xian, on the other hand, had a very good idea of who they were. However, unlike Shen Jun, she simply watched Yu Sheng fight. She came to realize that he was yet another person who would be able to threaten her. She lost to Yi Futian back in the Battle of Empty Realm, and she had always seen that defeat to be an insult. However, she never expected Yu Sheng to be just as formidable. He seemed to be invincible under Saint Plain. At that moment on the battlefield, Zhuosu gave up all of a sudden and took flight. There were only 6 people left standing on the battlefield. According to the rules, they were free to attempt to rise, so long as the Crimson Dragon above approved. However, Yu Sheng and the rest did not let him. They began making a move as soon as Zhuosu shot to the air, heading out and intercepting him above. Yu Sheng blocked his way, and brought his axe down on Zhuosu. Yi Wuchen's sword arrived as well, penetrating through his body. Zhuosu was bloodstained and dropped to the ground. Seeing Zhuosu dropping to the ground severely injured, and losing all capacity for combat, the last hope for many in the castles was snuffed out right there and then. It was a crushing defeat. Almost every single one of the native residents from all over Crimson Dragon Realm lost their bets, earning nothing. "We're rich," Yi Futian mumbled to himself. "Man, this feels good," he thought. It was said that participants were not allowed to continuously participate in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon, which he found to be a pity. He would have bankrupted the Crimson Dragon Emperor otherwise. He would have been willing to stay around and bet for a decade or so. What a shame. What a shame indeed. He came to wonder if the Crimson Dragon Emperor were able to read his thoughts. Would the Emperor clap him to death right there, and then? Yu Sheng and the other 4 remained standing in the air above the rising dragon platform. They lifted their heads to look at the opening, where the Crimson Dragon was seen circling above. Yu Sheng stepped out, and the others followed, heading upwards. They were rising from the platform. The Crimson Dragon's colossal body circled the opening. It looked at Yu Sheng and Yi Wuchen with its huge head, saying, "You both shall pass." Other than Yu Sheng, Yi Wuchen had also performed admirably, for he had been able to fight Zhuosu, qualifying him for the rise. While Huang Jiuge, Su Ke, and Qin Zhuang showed decent performance, they were nonetheless lacking. "All 5 of us are together," Yu Sheng said. "Please make way, senior." "No." The Holy Dragon looked at them with its huge eyes and said coldly. Yu Sheng stared at the dragon, and demonic might was seen overflowing. He still held on to his devil ass. Boom! The air shook as Yu Sheng stepped out, heading straight for the huge Crimson Dragon, shocking the spectators. Yu Sheng then brought his axe down onto the Crimson Dragon. Everyone watched in shock. What the hell is happening here? Is that guy trying to cut Dragon Demon Saint open? They wondered incredulously. Wah! When everyone realized what was happening, those in the castles who did not place bets and were simply there to watch the battle cheered with booming voices. This is awesome, they thought. Yu Sheng is just a true devil. He is going to cut anyone down who stands in his way. And demon saints are no exception. Many had only realized that he still had the axe in his hand, and his devil battle form was never dispelled. Had he been getting ready for this? That asterisk shoal knew what was coming and headed straight for the demon saint. This is just ridiculous, they thought. Many even began to curse and jeer, not knowing what words could describe their current thoughts. "You're going too far," the Crimson Dragon berated him, and terrifying flames were seen circling its huge eyes. It lashed out with its claws right at Yu Sheng. Yi Wuqian and Qin Zhuang's swords headed for the dragon's eyes. The crimson dragon roared angrily, opening its mouth. It breathed holy fire capable of burning everything down. Its claws clashed with the axe. The dragon then pulled its claws back, and Yu Sheng was thrown behind as well. The dragon then whipped its tail at Yu Sheng. Boom! Yu Sheng's devil battle form was hit with a loud boom. But he stuck to the tail and grabbed it, latching on to the crimson dragon's tail with both hands. What happened at the very next moment shocked everyone. Yu Sheng looked at the sky above and roared, hoisting the dragon up with all his might with both arms, which were still grabbing the dragon's tail. He then flung the demon saint dragon away. Go! Yu Sheng said. Yi Wuqian and the others took the chance and charged for the opening, taking only a split second to emerge outside. The dragon roared in rage, turning its head around. It breathed flames capable of burning everything down at Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng let go of the dragon's body while he stepped outside, charging like a bolt of lightning, while still burning with fires of the great path. The holy flames ended up only burning down his armor. All 5 of them emerged outside. Countless in the castles watched the scene unfold, and were silent for a brief moment before cheers erupted all over the place. What happened right there, and then was immensely shocking to all of them. The screen of light from the matrix crumbled when the rise was made. It was as if something was broken. Blinding light was then seen showering below. The screen of light from the matrix crumbled when the rise was made. It was as if something was broken. Blinding light was then seen showering below. Countless eyes in the castles were all focused at one single spot, the place where the 5 stood above the crimson dragon. Yu Sheng drew a great majority of the attention. All 5 of them rose from the rising dragon platform. The rules of the rising dragon platform, at the battle of the sleeping dragon, said anyone capable of breaking out of the opening was considered to have succeeded. A sacred beast-level demon saint was guarding the place, and without its permission, none who were deemed qualified were allowed to make it through the opening. The crimson dragon deemed that the other 3 were inadequate, while only Yu Sheng and Yi Wuqian made the cut. However, Yu Sheng managed to fling a demon saint away using his overwhelming strength, barging outside with all of the other 4. No one dared to do something like that in the past. What Yu Sheng did right there was challenging the rules, and yet he was still playing by the rules. That crimson dragon glared at Yu Sheng, having the great urge to chomp down on him and swallow him right there and then. It was an insult like none other. The dragon was actually flung away by a challenger of the battle of the sleeping dragon, whom it was tasked to guard against. The higher-ups were probably going to blame the dragon for slacking off. However, that man's strength was comparable to a saint's, as it would not have been able to fling something with its size away otherwise. Furthermore, his defense capacity was infinitely near that of a saint's as well. The flames of the great path were unable to burn him down after all. Yu Sheng lowered his head and looked at the dragon. There was no fear to be found in those pitch-black eyes of his. The dragon refused to let them pass, so he resorted to doing it the hard way instead. You really are something. A voice was heard from the crimson dragon before it headed below. The image on the ground lit up. It went into the matrix and disappeared. The saint who had been announcing the rules previously appeared once again in the air. He looked at all 5 of them and took out 5 tags, which he then handed to them. Congratulations. These are the rising dragon tags. Hold on to them. Regardless of what methods they used to achieve the objective, they had played by the rules of the Crimson Dragon realm, and it was only the outcome that mattered. Yu Sheng and the rest put their tags away, and many below St. Plain looked at them with envious eyes. With rising dragon tags in their hands, they were able to join the Crimson Dragon army anytime if they were willing. Everyone who made it through the battle of the Sleeping Dragon was awarded a rising dragon tag. That saint who gave them the tags did not explain what the tags were for. Anyone in Crimson Dragon realm would have known anyway. There was no need to elaborate. It was given that they were the ones participating in the battle of the Sleeping Dragon. The saint who handed them the rising dragon tag scanned the castles, and left soon after. One silhouette after another was seen taking to the air from the platform, heading for the castles. They were all people who survived on the battlefield. As for those perished, people would go to pick up their bodies. The Battle of the Sleeping Dragon had about a quarter of its participants die. The death count was very harrowing, and it served as a testament to the battle's brutality. Furthermore, those were all top-notch fighters to begin with. However, there was always someone stronger. For instance, Yusheng managed to overpower extremely formidable ones, like Yen Tong and Zhuosu. Yu Sheng and the others headed to where the ones from Qianye City were. Yi Futian and the others were able to sense many cold eyes clearly, and they did not seem friendly. In truth, Yu Sheng had gone easy on everyone during the later stages of the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon, instead of being as brutal as he could have been. Yen Tong and the others had been out to kill Yu Sheng right from the start, yet Yu Sheng pummeled them to the ground instead of killing them. Regardless, both Flaming Prison City and the Black Flame Clan had invested a great deal in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. The losses they suffered were harrowing. All of that happened because Yu Sheng showed up. Other than that, the group of mighty ones from Tianjin City, who had been out to kill Suke earlier, including by Qianluo of the City Lord's office, were all cut down by Yu Sheng. All of that made for a score that remained to be settled. Rest assured, Brother Yi, the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon has been held for many years, and all participants were participating out of their own will. They knew that there would be casualties, and there were grudges. But then again, most forces were still able to tell that they were inferior. So even if there were grudges, since Yu Sheng and the others were participating as representatives of Qianye City, those forces will not go wage wars between cities. Shen Jun spoke to Yi Futian with an amicable tone, appearing friendly. Yi Futian looked at him, and was thinking that Shen Jun was a snake for having duped Yu Sheng into participating in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. If he were to lose, there was the risk of dying. If he were to win, he would have definitely offended someone. If they offended someone, they would need protection from Qianye City to ensure their safety, as the cities in Crimson Dragon City had come to some consensus a long time ago. The Battle of the Sleeping Dragon had been held for too many years after all. Unless there was a party proving capable of gobbling up other cities, wars would not happen. But then again, there was still another option: joining the Crimson Dragon army. Thank you for your hospitality, young city lord, Yi Futian smiled and said. That would be my duty as host. Yu Sheng and the others performed perfectly this time. Qianye City will be able to reap benefits for having you all participate in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon. I should be the one thanking you instead, Brother Yi. I shall throw a feast for all forces in Qianye City when I return and introduce you to them, welcoming you to the city once again, Shen Jun said with a smile. A peculiar look was seen deep in Yi Futian's eyes. Shen Jun seemed to have been a lot more polite, and he seemed to have been more sincere. He had previously duped them into participating in the event, and yet he made it clear that Qianye City had something to gain from it. If things had gone that far, Yi Futian was ready to keep playing along. Right. I see that Yu Sheng, Huang Jioga, and the others are practicing different arts. It seems like my speculation before had proven erroneous. I take it that you all are not of the same force, Brother Yi? Shen Jun asked in a probing manner. Due to Yi Futian and Yaya being sword wielders, and later seeing Yi Wuchen and Suke being swordsmen as well, Shen Jun thought all of those people came from some top-notch holy land of the sword in Emperor Xia's realm. Most of us are, and there are some who are friends coming on the same trip, Yi Futian smiled and said. Most of them came from the Holy Ji Palace. Right. Huang Jioga emanated quite an extraordinary aura. I assume he is from some extraordinary clan then? Shen Jun took a look at Huang Jioga and continued to probe. Yi Futian smirked deep down. It seemed that Yu Sheng's frightening powers, as well as the abilities shown by Wuchen, Jioga, and the others, had made Shen Jun concerned. He then went about beating around the bush, trying to get to know who they really were. He had some mystical encounters. Yi Futian smiled and replied, not bothering to go into detail. Yi Futian just did not bother to deal with putting up an act that looked sincere. Yi Futian. A voice was heard at that moment. Yi Futian and the others turned around and saw a group of people at the castle across them, coming their way, and then hovering before them. The group was none other than those from the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm. The one who took the lead was Kong Xian. Her alluring body looked flawless. Her perfect curves, long legs, intricate features sporting a feral grace, were astonishing to any graced by her beauty. Princess Kong Xian of the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm was someone of the same status as Xia Qingyuan in Emperor Xia's realm. "What brings you here, Princess Kong Xian?" Yi Futian called with a smile. Kong Xian seemed to have gotten a good grip on her emotions, refraining from fighting him right there and then. Back in Empty Realm all those years ago, Kong Xian was practically looking at him with eyes saying that she wanted to flay him alive. That went for the bird as well. They had been inciting Kong Xian one too many times after all. The eyes of the black-winged condor at the side sparkled. It missed the days back in the Empty Realm. It no longer dared to say anything it had said back then, for the power difference between them did not allow it to. Jialo Feng, who was at the side, had eyes filled with murderous intent, but it kept it in check nonetheless. It wanted nothing more than to tear Yi Futian and the animal apart. However, as it came to sense Yi Futian's aura up close, it found that he had indeed become a saint. If they were actually to fight, it would have probably lost. If Jialo Feng were to be the princess, it would have ordered them all to fight right there and then. "Yi Futian, you all serve Emperor Xia's realm, and I wonder what the realm has given you? How about you come to the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm? What Emperor Xia's realm can give you, we at Demon Peacock Emperor's realm will be able to give you more. Furthermore, we shall do away with our past grudges," Kong Xian said. And Yi Futian felt somewhat surprised. He never expected the princess of Demon Peacock Emperor's realm to be there to recruit them instead. Kong Xian once lost to Yi Futian, and he had been able to steer the direction of the Battle of the Empty Realm single-handedly. Now that he became a saint, there was little to say about his powers and talents. Yu Sheng had crushed everyone else single-handedly and overwhelmed many top-notch figures in the Crimson Dragon realm, going so far as to toss a dragon demon saint aside, just to make way for Yi Wuxian and the others. The unnaturally powerful fighting prowess displayed by the two of them alone made it worthwhile for her to try to take them to her side. Those two would have definitely become top-notch fighters spoken about in legends. Xia Qingyuan frowned and glared at Kong Xian with cold eyes. "Are you here to recruit my people?" she thought, bewildered. A cold aura was faintly sensed emanating from her. There was no way Yi Futian would have agreed to Kong Xian's proposal. There was no doubt about it. Speaking of Kong Xian's invitation, Emperor Li's realm had been very generous to Yi Futian as well. The imperial advisor of Dali had taken Yi Futian in as his student and taught him the deed of thorough comprehension. Emperor Li of the Dali dynasty had wanted to marry off his daughter to him, to make him a son-in-law to the emperor. Conditions, eh? Just what kind of conditions could Kong Xian offer? Is she going to offer herself to me? Yi Futian thought. If you're willing to become his servant girl, we might consider it, Xia Qingyuan replied coldly. Damn. The black-winged condor blinked as it looked at Xia Qingyuan. The bird was thinking that she was indeed quite the devil, stealing a line that it wanted to say but dared not to. Kong Xian's eyes were cold, and there seemed to be divine light shining in them. She locked gazes with Xia Qingyuan, and formless fighting intent seemed to have spread all over the place. Thank you for your invitation, Princess Kong Xian, but I'm doing rather fine in Emperor Xia's realm. Yi Futian smiled and replied. Kong Xian had only pulled her gaze back and looked at Yi Futian, saying, Fine then, we'll see about that. She then took her people and left soon after. Xia Qingyuan shot a cold look at Yi Futian after she left. Shen Jun's eyes shifted around those before him. He was relieved deep down. It seemed that Yi Futian did not lie to him. Yi Futian was indeed from Emperor Xia's realm, and he was not a member of royalty. He was instead a subordinate serving Emperor Xia. But then again, he would have probably among those close to the royal members, which explained why Kong Xian would want him to switch sides. As for Xia Qingyuan, there was no way she would have been Yi Futian's wife. However, there were secrets between the two of them, as she was very naturally hostile against that beautiful princess from the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm. However, Shenjun did not go so far as to deduce Xia Qingyuan's status as a princess of Emperor Xia's realm. Yi Futian was the one who called the shots in the group, after all, which made him the leader. Even Xia Qingyuan was standing by his side while he was at the center. If Xia Qingyuan were the princess, this would have really been a mess. Yi Futian went to collect his winnings. Almost everyone who had bet lost. Yi Futian went to collect his winnings. Almost everyone who had bet lost. Yi Futian, Kong Xian, Shenjun, and Situ Yin were the only ones who won. In the past battles of the Sleeping Dragon, there had been several very highly anticipated participants as well. While the battles might have had many variables, most of the time, one of the highly anticipated ones was capable of succeeding. What happened right there in that battle was comparatively rare. It was a total loss for the spectators. Yi Futian was wondering how much the Crimson Dragon Emperor had been able to earn in that one battle of the Sleeping Dragon. It was no wonder why the event was held once a month. If I were the one holding the event, I'd have made it once every 3 days instead, he thought. But then again, while the Crimson Dragon Emperor might not have cared about those training resources himself, the ones serving him would have consumed such resources in massive quantities. You want to return to Qinya City, brother Yi? Shenjun's attitude towards Yi Futian was a lot more polite. While he would not have thought Xia Qingyuan to be a princess, being someone who was valued by royal members of both Emperor Xia's realm and Demon Peacock Emperor's realm, there was no doubt about his extraordinary talents. Yu Sheng's performance had been startling as well. As such, Shenjun's attitude towards those people changed. He would have avoided offending those people as best as he could. Even if they might not have been people serving Emperor Xia directly, they might be very trusted subordinates nonetheless. Furthermore, if he were to be able to befriend those people, that connection might prove useful in the future. Sure. How about you, heroine from Situ clan? Yi Futian looked at Situ Yin and said. Situ Yin glared at him, wondering why he was speaking in such a frivolous manner despite being a saint. How about we all return together, eh? I'm thinking of throwing a feast to welcome Brother Yi again. There will be a feast in several days at the City Lord's office. Please do show up, Shenjun smiled and said. Those from Qinya City all nodded. They needed to give that much face at least. The group took flight and headed towards Qinya City. Yi Futian then headed to the border of the Situ clan and said to Situ Yin, I'll pay a visit to the Situ clan later. I'll check on little Ran along the way. Sure. Situ Yin nodded and said, It'd be a great honor to the Situ clan to have you with us, Brother Yi. An elder from the Situ clan said with a smile. Yu Sheng's performance at the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon notwithstanding, the fact that Yi Futian and his party had destroyed the Bliss Palace was impressive enough. Both the Situ clan and the Bliss Palace were both top-notch forces in Qinya City, and both were not all that different in terms of powers. You're too kind, senior. Yi Futian smiled and nodded. You're a man of passion, Brother Yi. Shenjun, who was at the front, turned around, smiled and quipped. He found it surprising that Yi Futian was still concerned about the little girl. While he found that action to be disagreeable, he admitted that Yi Futian had superior character compared to him. Surviving in a chaotic place like Crimson Dragon Realm meant that cultivators were mostly preoccupied with enhancing their powers, using all means to strengthen themselves to gain control of greater resources. There was no way weaklings would have been able to survive at the Crimson Dragon Realm. What are you going to do at the Situ clan? Xia Qingyuan asked Yi Futian telepathically. To pay a visit to the clan leader of the Situ clan, Yi Futian replied. Xia Qingyuan nodded, and did not ask any further. We'd like you to visit the Mo clan as well if you have the time. An elder of the clan, Mo Chen, extended his invitation as well. The Mo clan was also a top-notch force in Qinya City. Sure, I'd pay a visit, Yi Futian smiled and replied. That settles it then. That mighty one did not expect Yi Futian to agree in such a forthright manner, which he found surprising. That settles it. Yi Futian flashed a beaming, warm smile, which made those around him feel comfortable. You should come by Qinya City often in the future, Brother Yi. It'd do you a lot of good to visit the place more often. I'm prepared to introduce you to the forces throughout the city, by the way. Shinjun smiled and said. Thank you for your hospitality, Yi Futian replied. That's nothing. You're one of us from here on out. If you run into any trouble in Qinya City, you're welcome to look for me always. Shinjun answered in a very polite manner. Right. I do have a favor to ask from you, Brother Shin. I'm afraid I have to bother you at the city lord's office at a later date. Yi Futian nodded and said seriously. No problem. Shinjun smiled and said. He was wondering if Yi Futian would have just let the grudge the newcomer had with him slide. It was apparent that Yi Futian resented him for one thing or another. It would have been nice if Yi Futian needed a favor, and he would have done all in his power to help. After returning to Qinya City from Crimson Dragon City, everyone returned to their home. Shinjun returned to the city lord's office, while Yi Futian returned to the inn. The news with the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon spread all over the place and shocked many. No one would have expected the group that had destroyed the Bliss Palace would have had someone so terrifying among their sages, who practically mopped the floor with the top-notch figures who participated in the Battle of the Sleeping Dragon that time. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng become two very, very renowned names in Qinya City. Yi Futian took several people to pay a visit to the Situ clan the next day. Many in the Situ clan came to receive him. Situ Yen appeared with little Ran as well. Uncle Yen. The little girl called obediently and smiled. Yi Futian hugged little Ran for a bit, and then turned to the people of the Situ clan. Thank you for all you've done. We have an honored guest here, and the feast is ready. Please help yourself, Sir Yi, someone among them said. Yi Futian nodded and smiled. He walked to Situ Yan's side and said, I'd like to pay a visit to the leader of the Situ clan. Sure, I'll tell grandfather. Situ Yan nodded and said. Everyone took their seats at the feast at the Situ clan shortly after. A very old-looking elder stepped out, emanating an esteemed, imposing aura. Yi Futian rose and bowed. I'm Yi Futian, pleased to meet you, senior. Situ Zhong then nodded with a smile, saying, Your name has reached my ears in the clan, Brother Yi. No need for formalities. Please take a seat. Thank you, senior. Yi Futian then said. Miss Situ here is valiant and forthcoming. Now that I meet her grandfather, I hardly find it surprising at all. You're too kind. Being able to destroy the Bliss Palace for just one little girl is one hell of a feat. We old folks are just older than you guys are. The place will belong to your generation sooner or later. Situ Zhong's voice was brimming and unbridled, making him sound like a grand bell and filled with spirit. It was done on a whim. Yi Futian then smiled and said, I just found what Bai Zhe did to be too disagreeable. Trampling on the lives of others without care is indeed despicable. But then again, that has always been the case with the world of cultivators. Even if you intend to change things, I wonder how many you could kill. Cultivators who have reached an age like Situ Zhong had long seen what the world was like. There were many types of cultivators in the world. Indeed, Yi Futian nodded. But since I happened to see something happening right in front of me, I just did what I could. It is for this matter that I come to visit you. How so? Situ Zhong looked at Yi Futian. The Crimson Dragon realm is strong, and people from all realms gather here. So there are many extraordinarily talented people around. They might lack opportunities. I'm thinking of setting up a place for cultivation here in Qinya City. What do you think, senior? Yi Futian said. Situ Zhong's expression was peculiar upon hearing what Yi Futian said. It was apparent that he was surprised. Cultivators came and went throughout the cities of the Crimson Dragon realm, because so many from all realms gathered there. Even someone who held control over a city might have just left the place any time to train elsewhere. What Yi Futian put forth was hardly seen in Crimson Dragon realm. It was especially so with how things were in the cities of the Crimson Dragon realm, which were very unstable. There were few who would have bothered wasting resources to establish such places of training. Brother Yi, things at Crimson Dragon realm are complicated, and the people traveling between cities are in a very unstable state. It will take a very long time before results are seen. In Qinya City, By the way, those who stay here for long are only clans that have taken root here, Situzhong said. It is precisely for that reason that I come to you, senior. Propagating the path and cultivation would do immense good for the development of Qianya City. If a force like the Situ clan were willing to join, when Qianya City becomes strong, the Situ clan would prosper along with the city. What prompted you to go that far? Situzhong asked. None of that seemed to be doing much for Yi Futian himself. I'd like to see the powers of Qianya City consolidated, and to make Qianya City the topmost city in all of Crimson Dragon Realm in the future. Yi Futian answered. But then again, I might not be the one doing all that. Those are my thoughts. This might require cooperation from the city lord. I'm afraid the Situ clan still falls short of pulling off something like that, Situzhong said. He was able to vaguely sense that Yi Futian might have wanted to do something else to get this off the ground. Furthermore, there was still a lack of a true reason from Yi Futian. Why would he want to consolidate powers and develop Qianya City? I'd like to introduce you to someone, senior. Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan by his side and said, This is the princess of Emperor Xia's realm, Xia Qingyuan. Situzhong was dumbfounded, and took a look at Xia Qingyuan. He was vaguely able to understand why Yi Futian wanted to do what he said he wanted to do. If that proved to be the case, then the reasons were indeed more than enough. There were many imperial realms from the Crimson Dragon region coming to set up shop and expand their forces at Crimson Dragon Realm. For instance, the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm that Kong Xian belonged to reigned over Peacock City. If Emperor Xia's realm were to be a part of a city, it would have been a sufficient reason for developing the powers of a city. Situyen looked at Xia Qingyuan, feeling shocked. Many others from the clan shared the sentiment. Xia Qingyuan, the woman who had been following Yi Futian around, is a princess of Emperor Xia's realm? She thought. None of them saw that coming. They wondered what kind of status Yi Futian had back at Emperor Xia's realm. Even the princess is at his side, they thought. Situyen realized all of a sudden that if that had never occurred to her, then it would have never occurred to Xinjun as well. From the looks of things, the conversation between Yi Futian and Xinjun the day before had a lot going on between the lines. Is Emperor Xia's realm planning to expand in Qianya City? Situzhong looked at Xia Qingyuan and asked. I'd like your kind assistance, senior, Xia Qingyuan answered. Situzhong was silent for a bit. His position naturally compelled him to consider his clan's interests, to see if the proposal would have done the clan good or harm. Yi Futian's character suggested that he was a man of his word, that he was a comparatively upright man, and would not scheme against them. If Emperor Xia's realm indeed intended to expand its influence in Qianya City, then it would be more influential and powerful than the current city lord's office. I'm glad to be of service, princess. Situzhong raised his cup and said, Thank you, senior. Xia Qingyuan and Yi Futian both raised their cups at the answer. The deal was considered sealed by then. They naturally needed support from top-notch forces in Qianya City if they wanted to set up shop there, instead of just beating everyone down. Diplomacy served better at times. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.